The chandeliers inside the Ritz-Carlton ballroom flickered like frozen stars, casting their pale gold light across a sea of gowns, tuxedos, and the quiet hum of New York's most powerful people. But the moment Adrian Lockwood stepped onto the marble floor, the room itself seemed to shift. Conversations softened, cameras angled. Somewhere near the stage, a woman in a headset whispered into her walkie-talkie, eyes glued to the entrance. That woman was Caroline Hale. She didn't mean to look at him. She didn't want to. For 17 years she had mastered the art of pretending this man didn't exist. But a strange hush rolled through the ballroom, and curiosity tugged her chin upward. There he was, tall, immaculate in a midnight black tux, wearing confidence like a crown. Adrian Lockwood, the CEO the world worshipped as the next Silicon Valley miracle. The man who had once held her heart in the dark stairwell of a Boston dorm. The man who vanished without a word when her life turned into a storm. Caroline inhaled lightly, steadying herself. She had a job tonight: lighting designer, event coordinator, invisible staff. She couldn't afford to tremble when she still owed hospital bills from her mother's final year. She couldn't afford to lose focus now, not when every paycheck mattered. "Mom," a soft voice murmured beside her, "my badge isn't scanning." She looked down at Evan, 16, lanky, shoulders still figuring out their place in the world. His eyes were sharp, observant, a stormy gray that she prayed no one else would recognize. She reached for his lanyard, brushing her thumb across the faulty chip. "It's fine," she whispered. "Just stay close to me." But Evan wasn't looking at the badge anymore. His gaze had drifted across the ballroom and landed, unmistakably, on Adrian. Caroline saw his expression shift. Confusion first, then something else. Something she had feared for years. Recognition. Adrian stopped walking. He had been gliding toward a cluster of investors, rehearsing numbers in his mind, polishing the smile he'd use for the cameras. But now, mid-step, his body locked. His eyes fixed across the room. His breath caught so sharply that the woman on his arm asked, "Adrian, what is it?" He didn't answer. Because in the far corner, standing beneath a column of soft white light, he saw her. Caroline, the girl he once promised forever. The girl he abandoned the moment life demanded courage he didn't have. And standing next to her was a boy with his own face. Same gray eyes, same brow, same quiet storm beneath the surface. A ripple moved across the crowd as Adrian's composure cracked. Investors turned. Guests glanced back. A photographer lifted a camera, sensing something unscripted. Caroline felt the air thicken. Evan tugged her sleeve. "Mom," he whispered, voice trembling. "Why is he staring at me like that?" Caroline swallowed hard, because the past she buried was waking up, right here, right now, in front of everybody. And Adrian Lockwood was walking toward them. Caroline's fingers tightened around Evan's wrist, just moments before the entire ballroom turned to witness the first blow of a storm 17 years in the making. Caroline Hale had never planned to return to New York, much less to a ballroom filled with the kind of people who once made her feel small enough to disappear. Yet here she was, headset clipped over one ear, clipboard in hand, weaving between floral arrangements and lighting rigs like a woman who belonged. No one in the room knew she had barely held her life together these last few years. No one knew she had cried in hospital corridors, or counted coupons to survive, or carried a heartbreak so old and so deep it still ached when she breathed too fast. Life hadn't given her many choices. After her mother's illness drained every cent she'd saved, she moved from city to city, chasing steady work, settling in Manhattan only when a friend recommended her to a small events company. She worked quietly, avoiding attention, grateful just to pay rent on their tiny one-bedroom overlooking a fire escape. Her days were long, her nights longer, but she built a life for Evan, piece by piece, paycheck by paycheck. She had never complained, not once. Tonight was supposed to be a milestone for her. She had spent weeks designing the lighting scheme for this charity gala, working until her fingers cramped and her eyes blurred. She wanted to prove herself, to show she could rise without anyone's help. But standing in this glittering ballroom, watching wealthy guests circulate under crystal chandeliers, Caroline felt painfully aware of how out of place she truly was, and how dangerously close her past now stood. "Mom, do you want me to help with the cables?" Evan asked, shifting his weight as he held a coil of wires. He always tried to help, even when she insisted he didn't have to. "No, sweetheart," she said softly. "Just stay where I can see you. That's all I need." She brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. Her hands were steady, but her heart wasn't. She told herself the uneasy feeling in her stomach was simply stress, exhaustion, anything except the truth clawing its way up her spine. Because deep down, she knew this night felt wrong, like the air was waiting to break. 17 years ago, Caroline was studying theater design in Boston, full of dreams as big as the campus lawns. She had fallen in love too quickly, with a man too charming, too brilliant, too certain of the life he deserved. Adrian Lockwood had swept her into a world that didn't belong to her. Late-night study dates, whispered promises in shadowed hallways, plans for a future she had believed with her whole heart. Until she told him she was pregnant. And everything changed. He didn't shout, he didn't argue, he simply vanished. One day he was her entire world, the next no calls, no messages, no trace. His family, powerful and unforgiving, made it clear she was no longer welcome near him. She had been left with nothing, not even an explanation. But she survived. She rebuilt. She raised Evan with every ounce of strength she had left. New York didn't know her story. This ballroom didn't know her story. She preferred it that way. But fate wasn't subtle tonight. Because as Caroline adjusted the spotlight on the center stage, she felt the weight of someone watching her. The weight of a gaze she once knew better than her own heartbeat. It slid across her skin like cold water. She looked up, and there he was. Adrian Lockwood, the ghost of her past, standing at the opposite end of the ballroom, looking straight at her. Looking at Evan. Looking at the life he had abandoned. And for the first time in 17 years, Caroline's breath faltered. Because Adrian wasn't just staring. He was walking toward her, with the same determination that once destroyed everything she had. The Ritz-Carlton ballroom had always been a temple of power. Gleaming marble floors, velvet-draped doors, and chandeliers worth more than Caroline's entire building. But tonight it felt even grander, buzzing with the kind of anticipation that only comes when billionaires gather to display generosity they hope the world will applaud. Cellists near the stage played soft, honey-colored notes, their bows gliding like silk over strings. Servers in crisp black uniforms floated through the room with trays of champagne flutes that sparkled under the golden lights. And everywhere Caroline looked, wealth shimmered like a second skin. Donors in tailored gowns whispered behind jeweled hands. Bankers compared numbers with quiet arrogance. Influencers took photos near the ice sculpture shaped like the hosting foundation's logo. A cluster of CEOs stood near the bar, laughing too loudly, each of them dressed to impress in suits that cost more than Caroline's yearly salary. It was the kind of room where people measured worth not by kindness, but by the glint of a watch or the cut of a suit. The kind of room where she had always felt invisible. But tonight, she wasn't the only outsider. Evan stood beside the lighting console, his eyes wide as he took in the luxury around him. He tried to act like it didn't faze him, but Caroline saw the tension in his shoulders. "People here act like they own the whole planet," he murmured. Caroline smiled faintly. "They just act like they do, honey. Doesn't mean they actually do." She turned to check the spotlight angles again. This event was important. If she nailed the lighting cues, she might finally earn a permanent position instead of being stuck with temporary contracts. She needed this job. She needed stability for Evan. She needed a break. But for all her planning, she could never have predicted what the night still held. Caroline stepped toward the stage to confirm the final cue with the host. She had walked this path a dozen times tonight, weaving through clusters of Manhattan's elite. She passed a table decorated with white roses flown in from Ecuador. Another held Tiffany blue gift boxes meant for VIP donors. At one point, she caught a glimpse of Manhattan's skyline glittering through the tall windows, an elegant reminder of the world she had never been part of. Then she noticed something else. Whispers. Not normal gala whispers. Secretive, electric, curious. People were turning. Their eyes weren't on the performers, not on the stage, not even on the donors. They were looking toward the far end of the ballroom. Caroline followed their gaze, already knowing, deep down, what she would see. Adrian. His presence cut through the room like a blade. His tuxedo was sharp, his posture polished, his aura unmistakable. A man used to holding boardrooms hostage with nothing but silence. A man who'd convinced the world he was unbreakable. But tonight, he looked shaken. Off balance. Almost raw. He wasn't looking at the investors hovering near him. He wasn't acknowledging his PR director tugging at his sleeve. He wasn't even noticing the cameras flashing like fireworks around him. He was staring at her. No, past her, at Evan. Caroline felt the room tilt. Her fingers curled into her palms, nails pressing crescents into her skin. She prayed no one else could see the resemblance, those gray eyes, that angular jaw, but she knew better. These people lived on gossip. The slightest spark could ignite a wildfire. She reached for Evan instinctively, but before she could touch him, someone stepped in front of her. Troy Bennett. He had arrived without a sound, wearing a charcoal suit that caught the light like brushed steel. Calm, collected, unreadable, an anchor in the storm. "Caroline," he said quietly, "don't look at him." But she already had, and Adrian was crossing the ballroom, toward her, toward Evan, toward the truth she had spent 17 years burying under silence. Adrian Lockwood was the kind of man people noticed before he even stepped into a room. Tonight was no different. As he strode through the crowd, conversations halted mid-sentence. Investors stiffened. Socialites straightened their posture. Even the orchestra's notes seemed to tremble for a beat, as if acknowledging the arrival of a man whose name could move markets. But beneath his polished calm, something was deeply wrong. His jaw clenched tighter than any camera could catch. His pupils flickered with confusion, then disbelief, then something colder. Fear. This wasn't the expression of a CEO greeting donors at a gala. This was a man watching a ghost climb out of the grave he buried her in. Caroline Hale. And next to her, a boy who mirrored Adrian's features so perfectly it was like time had doubled back on itself. The PR director rushed toward him, whispering, "Sir, the venture partners are waiting for your speech." "Not now," Adrian muttered, brushing him off without breaking his gaze. He hadn't seen her in 17 years. 17 years since he panicked like a coward and vanished from her life. 17 years since he chose ambition over responsibility. And 17 years since he made the worst mistake of his life. One he spent every day pretending never happened. Caroline hadn't changed the way he expected. She wasn't fragile anymore. She wasn't the soft-spoken girl who trusted him too easily. Her face held strength now. A quiet resilience carved from years he didn't witness. Her posture no longer bent toward him. She stood on her own, solid, unshakable. And that terrified him more than the boy. Because if Caroline had survived without him, she might be strong enough to destroy him. The IPO was 2 months away. His entire public image rested on his reputation as a family-oriented philanthropist. One scandal, just one, could tank the offering, strip him of control, and send the board into a frenzy. He had hidden the past well, paid the right people, manipulated the records, deleted what needed deleting. No one knew. No one could ever know. Yet now, a boy with his eyes stood 3 feet from the stage. The guests sensed the tension like wolves catching scent of blood. Half the ballroom pretended to mingle while their eyes darted between Adrian and Caroline. 2 women near the floral centerpieces whispered behind manicured hands. "Isn't that the lighting technician?" "She looks familiar." And the boy, "My God, is that?" Adrian forced a tight breath. He had to regain control. He couldn't let panic show. He straightened his tuxedo jacket and approached with the smooth determination that made him famous. But Troy Bennett stepped forward first. Troy's calm expression masked the steel beneath. "Evening, Adrian." Adrian's eyes narrowed. Troy Bennett, the investor whose presence always felt like a silent chess game. A man with influence beyond what tabloids ever mentioned, and someone Adrian never fully trusted. "What are you doing here?" Adrian asked. Troy smiled politely. "Supporting a good cause, something you should try more often." It was a small sentence, but the edge beneath it was sharp enough to draw blood. Caroline stiffened. Evan looked between the 2 men, sensing a storm he didn't understand. Adrian took 1 step closer. His voice dropped low, dangerously controlled. "Caroline, we need to talk." Her hand instinctively moved in front of Evan, a protective gesture Adrian noticed immediately. "No," she said quietly, "we don't." Her refusal stung, unexpectedly, humiliatingly. He wasn't used to anyone denying him access, least of all the one person he'd once believed would never defy him. "This isn't a request," Adrian said. But before another word could escape, Troy shifted slightly, blocking Adrian's view with deliberate calm. "Then maybe," Troy said softly, "you shouldn't be the one making demands." Adrian's facade cracked. For the first time that night, genuine anger flickered in his eyes. And across the ballroom, cameras turned, catching the moment the past finally cornered the man who spent 17 years running from it. The tension near the center of the ballroom thickened until it felt like the air itself was holding its breath. What began as a few curious glances had grown into a silent, expanding circle of attention. Guests shifted subtly, drifting closer under the guise of admiring the ice sculpture or adjusting their place cards. But their eyes were fixed on the unfolding scene, on Caroline, on Evan, and on Adrian Lockwood's unraveling composure. Caroline felt the heat of every stare. She stepped slightly in front of Evan, shielding him as best she could. But there was no hiding now. The worst part wasn't the whispers. It was the cameras, small, sleek, phone-sized lenses held by donors and influencers who documented everything without shame. A scandal at a gala? That was the kind of footage people uploaded before dessert. Her boss, Marla, rushed toward her, panic etched into her expression. "Caroline," she hissed under her breath. "What is happening? Why is Adrian Lockwood staring at your son like that?" "I don't know," Caroline lied quickly. It didn't matter whether people believed her. The damage had already begun. Adrian's PR director practically sprinted through the crowd, forcing a stiff smile. "Mr. Lockwood," he whispered urgently, "the cameras are picking you up. Please step away from the staff. We need to get you back to the stage." But Adrian didn't move. His gaze flicked to Evan again, and something in his face shifted. Recognition, denial, fear, all tangled together. "Who is he?" Adrian demanded, voice low but sharp enough that several people nearby heard anyway. Caroline's breath caught. "Not here," she warned softly, but her attempt to contain the moment only fueled curiosity. A woman in a sequined gold gown leaned toward her husband. "This feels like a soap opera," she muttered, not even pretending to whisper. Troy stepped closer, his presence a wall of calm in the chaos. "Back off, Adrian. You're making a scene." Adrian glared. "Stay out of this." The confrontation was moments from igniting when the event host, oblivious to everything, tapped the microphone on stage. A loud thump echoed through the ballroom, drawing all eyes forward. "Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats." But no one moved. They were waiting, hungry for whatever drama would erupt next. Then it happened. A journalist from a business magazine, sensing blood, slipped through the crowd and snapped a photo directly at Caroline and Evan. The flash lit their faces in stark white light. "Hey," Troy barked, stepping in front of the lens. "Public event," the journalist replied smugly. "And that boy looks—" "Delete it," Caroline said sharply, her voice shaking. But it was too late. The journalist tapped his phone. "Already uploaded to my editor." Adrian's face drained of color. The whispering swelled like a tide. "He's a Lockwood. Look at him. Oh my God, that's his son. No wonder Adrian looks sick. Did he hide a baby before his IPO?" Every word sliced into Caroline. She had spent 16 years protecting Evan from this moment, this exact nightmare. "Mom?" Evan whispered, cheeks reddening as dozens of strangers stared at him like an exhibit. Caroline felt her world tilting. She forced her voice steady. "Stay behind me." Adrian took a step forward. "Caroline, we are not doing this in public. We need to." "You don't get to decide what we do," she snapped quietly. It was the first time she had spoken to him directly, and it struck him harder than any shout. The host again attempted to regain order. "Please take your seats." But suddenly a security guard approached Marla, whispering urgently. Marla's eyes widened in horror. She turned to Caroline, her voice tight. "The board of this event is demanding to know if you caused a PR disruption involving Adrian Lockwood. They want you removed from the ballroom." Caroline's stomach dropped. Of course, blame the woman, blame the staff, blame the easiest target. "What?" Evan burst out. "She didn't do anything." But the guard stepped forward anyway. "Ma'am, please come with me." Gasps rippled across the room as dozens of wealthy spectators watched with avid fascination. Troy stepped between them. "She's not going anywhere." But the guard shook his head. "Sir, the order is final. She must leave." Caroline felt humiliation burn through her like fire. And across the ballroom, Adrian froze, caught between fear of exposure and the memory of the girl he once abandoned. And as security moved closer, the crowd realized something devastating. The first casualty of tonight's scandal was Caroline Hale. Caroline had always imagined humiliation as something sharp, like a slap or a scream, but this was worse. Humiliation tonight felt slow, suffocating, like being lowered into ice water while the world stood around watching. The security guard stepped closer, lifting a hand in a rehearsed gesture meant to appear polite. "Ma'am, please follow me. The board doesn't want any disruptions near the donors." Donors. Wealth. Optics. Those always mattered more than truth. Evan grabbed Caroline's arm. "She didn't do anything. I'm the one who dropped the badge. Just tell them." "No," Caroline murmured, squeezing his hand. "You don't defend me? I defend you." Her voice trembled, but her spine remained straight. She wouldn't let her son crumble, not for a man like Adrian, not for a room full of spectators who treated their pain like entertainment. Marla, flustered and sweating, wrung her hands. "Caroline, please understand. If the board thinks you're tied to some scandal, they could cut our contract next year. The company could lose thousands." Of course, her job, barely enough to survive, was suddenly the scapegoat for a billionaire's secrets. Adrian finally moved, jaw tight. "She's not the problem. I need to speak with." But Caroline cut him off sharply. "I'm not talking to you." For a split second, Adrian looked like someone had struck him. Whispers buzzed through the ballroom like wasps. Did she just snap at him? She must be the mother. This is going to blow up online. That boy, those eyes. Caroline felt her pulse thundering in her ears. Her hands shook, her throat burned. She wanted to disappear, to slip out of the room and run with Evan until the night swallowed them whole. But the guard edged forward again. "Ma'am, if you don't cooperate, we'll have to escort you out." Troy stepped into the guard's path. "Touch her and you'll regret it." The guard stiffened. "Sir, please don't escalate." "I'm not escalating," Troy said evenly. "I'm protecting someone who hasn't done a damn thing wrong." Adrian bristled. "Bennett, stay out of this. I said I need to handle it." Troy shot him a cold, amused look. "You can't handle anything tonight, Adrian. The room is watching you melt." A few guests snickered under their breath. Adrian's mask cracked further. He turned to Caroline, voice low and desperate. "We need to talk, privately." "No." Her voice broke, but she forced it steady. "Whatever you think you needed to say 17 years ago, you don't get to say it now." The crowd gasped softly. This was better than any speech, better than champagne, better than the orchestra. Real emotion, raw, painful, unscripted, was the most expensive entertainment of all. Evan stepped closer to his mother, shoulders shaking. His cheeks were blotched red. He wasn't crying, but he was close. Caroline knew that look. He was trying to be strong for her, to be the adult. It shattered her heart. Then the worst happened. A phone buzzed. Someone gasped loudly, then held up a screen. "Oh my God, the photo is online already." Within seconds, more people checked their devices. Headlines appeared like vultures. "Unknown teen looks identical to tech CEO Adrian Lockwood. Secret son?" "Lockwood scandal erupts at Ritz-Carlton gala." "Who is the woman with the boy?" Caroline felt her knees weaken, her vision blurred around the edges. She reached for the table next to her, steadying herself on its cold glass surface. Evan panicked. Mom, breathe." She tried, but her chest tightened painfully. The room spun with glittering lights and murmurs. The chandelier seemed to sway. She felt herself folding inward, her body rebelling after years of holding too much alone. Troy caught her arm. "Caroline, hey, look at me." But she couldn't, not when the life she built was being stripped away in front of strangers. Not when her son was staring at her with wide, terrified eyes. Not when Adrian Lockwood, the man who once shattered her world, now stood a few feet away watching her break again. Her voice finally cracked, barely audible. I can't do this." And then Caroline's legs buckled. As she collapsed, the entire ballroom gasped, right before the cameras turned to capture her fall. Caroline didn't remember hitting the floor. One moment the ballroom tilted like a sinking ship, and the next she felt cool marble beneath her palms. The lights overhead blurred into shimmering halos. People rushed toward her, some out of concern, most out of morbid curiosity. Phones lifted. Flashes burst like white firecrackers. But she didn't see any of it. She only saw Evan's face hovering above her, pale and terrified. Mom, can you hear me?" His voice cracked, and that alone was enough to ground her. She forced her lungs to expand. fighting the panic clawing up her throat. Her vision cleared just enough to see Troy kneeling beside her, one hand steadying her shoulder. "You're okay," he murmured softly. "Just breathe." Then another shadow loomed over her, a shadow she had prayed never to see again. "Caroline," Adrian said tightly, "what happened? Are you hurt?" She flinched, not from pain but from the sound of his voice so close to her. The sound of 17 years ago, resurrected without permission. "Don't," she whispered, pulling her arm away. "Don't touch me." Adrian froze, stunned by the rejection. He looked at Troy as if trying to decipher why the other man was even there. Troy raised an eyebrow. "Back up, Adrian. You've done enough." That stung. Adrian's jaw tensed. "I didn't do anything to her." "You did everything to her," Troy replied calmly. The crowd behind them sucked in a collective breath. Several donors exchanged glances. Someone whispered, "This is getting interesting." Another said, "Should someone stop them?" But no one did. They were too invested now, like spectators at an expensive theater show that suddenly turned real. Caroline forced herself to sit up, leaning against Troy's arm for support. Evan clutched her hand so tightly she winced. "I'm fine," she whispered to him. "I promise." But she wasn't. She was collapsing inward, shaking from a lifetime of buried truths clawing their way out. Then a voice cut through the chaos. "Mom, look." Evan held out something small and metallic, a badge. The same employee access badge he'd accidentally found near the lighting console earlier that evening. But now it was open. The retractable card holder had split when he grabbed it from his pocket. Inside was a tiny silver drive, no bigger than a coin. "What's that?" Caroline asked faintly. I didn't mean to break it," Evan said. "But when it popped open, this fell out." Adrian's eyes widened in recognition and panic. Troy caught it instantly. "You know what that is?" "It's nothing," Adrian snapped. "Really?" Troy picked up the drive between two fingers. "Then why is your company's internal security tag hiding a private data chip?" The crowd murmured again. Caroline blinked at Adrian, confused. "What is that?" Adrian swallowed hard. Too hard. Troy stood slowly, leveling his gaze at the CEO. "What were you trying to hide, Adrian? More importantly, what were you trying to access?" Adrian's face drained of color. "Give that to me." "No," Troy said, voice steady. "Not tonight." Caroline stared between them, realization dawning painfully. "Did you investigate me?" Adrian didn't answer. Troy did. "He didn't just investigate you. He used his own company to run unauthorized searches, probably digging into medical records, addresses, employment history, anything he could find to confirm whether Evan was his." A shocked gasp rippled across the ballroom. Adrian snapped. "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly," Caroline said, her voice breaking. "You didn't come here to apologize. You came here because you were scared." Adrian's mask shattered completely. "Caroline, I was trying to protect my company, my board, my future." "And what about my son?" she demanded. "Did you even think about him? Even once?" Adrian opened his mouth, but no sound came out. For the first time he had no script, no charm, no excuse. Troy placed himself fully between them, shielding Caroline and Evan. "You wanted a secret, Adrian," he said quietly. "Well, it's not a secret anymore." Cameras clicked wildly. Donors whispered louder. A scandal was no longer brewing. It had detonated. And as Adrian stood frozen in front of the woman he destroyed, the truth he tried to bury finally began dragging him under. The ballroom, which only an hour ago sparkled with champagne laughter and polished elegance, now felt like a courtroom. Hundreds of eyes formed a silent jury, witnessing every breath, every tremor, every exposed fracture of Adrian Lockwood's carefully curated life. The golden chandeliers glowed above them like harsh interrogation lamps. Troy still held the tiny silver drive between his fingers, and its weight, small as it was, seemed to crush the air around them. Caroline pushed herself to her feet slowly. She was still unsteady, but she refused to remain on the floor while the man who once abandoned her stood towering above. Troy offered his arm, but she gently shook her head. She needed her strength, her own strength. Adrian watched her rise, pain flickering briefly across his face. For a second, he looked almost human. "Caroline," he said quietly, almost pleading, "please, come with me somewhere private. Let me explain." "Explain what?" she asked, voice soft but clear. "How you disappeared when I needed you most, how you pretended I never existed, or how you used your company to dig through my life now because you're afraid of losing money." Adrian inhaled sharply. The truth struck harder when she spoke it out loud. Around them, the crowd swallowed every word. Evan stepped closer to her, protective now. "Mom, you don't have to listen to him." Adrian's gaze landed on the boy again, and something unguarded flickered in his eyes. Regret? Fear? Sadness? No one could tell. His voice cracked just slightly. "Evan," he murmured. Evan stiffened instantly. "Don't say my name." A few guests murmured, touched by the boy's bravery. Others stared at Adrian like witnessing a fallen king. Troy turned the silver drive over in his palm. "There's only one reason a man like you hides a chip inside a security badge. You were trying to erase something, weren't you?" Adrian shot him a look of ice. "You have no idea what you're talking about." "Oh, I do," Troy replied calmly, "because I've seen your company's cybersecurity protocols, and whatever's on this drive, you didn't want it connected to you." Caroline's heartbeat thudded painfully. "What is it?" she asked. Adrian hesitated. It was the smallest pause, but it was damning. Troy caught it. "He knows." The crowd whispered louder. "Is it the paternity results? Did he run DNA testing illegally? Did he pay someone off? Did he know about the boy all along?" Theories swirled like wildfire. Adrian finally broke. "Enough!" His voice cracked through the ballroom like shattered glass. "You don't know the full story." Troy folded his arms. "Then tell it. Right here. Right now." Adrian's face tightened. "Not in front of them." "Why not?" Caroline asked. "The world was good enough for you to build your empire on, but not good enough to hear the truth?" He looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time, the man who commanded boardrooms looked powerless. "Caroline," he breathed, "I never stopped thinking about you." The words fell flat. Too late, too empty. She shook her head. "You didn't think about me. You thought about the mess it would cause if your perfect future had a flaw." He winced. Troy stepped forward, voice cool. "Let me guess. You found out she kept the pregnancy. You panicked. You buried it. And when you saw Evan tonight, you realized the truth was about to explode." Adrian didn't deny it. Caroline saw it in his eyes, the silent confession of a man whose lies were finally collapsing. Suddenly, one of the journalists raised his phone. "Mr. Lockwood, is it true? Is this boy your son?" Adrian's breath hitched. Caroline froze. Evan looked terrified. The room leaned in. Adrian opened his mouth, but before he could answer, Troy slid the silver drive into his jacket pocket and spoke loud enough for the entire ballroom to hear. "Before he answers anything, I think everyone should know. This drive contains something even worse than a hidden child." The ballroom erupted with gasps. Adrian's face drained white. Caroline stared at Troy, shock flooding her veins. "What's on it?" she whispered. Troy's voice was calm, but deadly. Proof that Adrian knew about Evan years ago. The ballroom erupted into chaos so abruptly that the orchestra faltered mid-bowstroke. Gasps, frantic whispers, and the frantic tapping of phone screens filled the space with a restless electricity. The city's richest and most influential now stood shoulder to shoulder, united by one thing: the thrill of a scandal big enough to scorch a CEO's empire. Adrian looked like someone had yanked the floor out from under him. His polished calm, his beautifully curated public image, gone. He stared at Troy as if wrestling between rage and panic. "That's a lie," Adrian snapped, voice cracking. "I didn't know. I couldn't have known." Troy tilted his head slightly, studying him like a man observing a struggling fish caught in its own net. "Really? Then why is there a company security chip containing encrypted search logs with Caroline's medical records from 17 years ago?" A collective gasp swept across the room. Medical records. A single phrase that carried more weight than any headline. Caroline's breath caught in her chest. "Medical records?" she whispered. "You searched my medical records?" Adrian dragged a hand through his hair, his composure slipping further. "Caroline, please, you don't understand." "No," she said, voice sharp and trembling. "You don't get to say that. Not after what you did." Evan's voice cracked. "You checked her records? Before I was even born?" Adrian turned pale. "It wasn't like that." "It was exactly like that," Troy cut in. "You ran searches through your company's server back when you were still just a junior analyst. You used someone else's login. Someone who later left the company under questionable circumstances." A ripple of shock passed through the audience. A woman muttered, "He must have paid them off." Another whispered, "That's illegal. That's federal." Someone near the back said, "His IPO is dead." Adrian's breathing turned shallow. His empire, his spotless reputation, was unraveling in real time. "This is absurd," Adrian insisted. "Those logs don't prove anything." Troy let out a soft laugh. "They prove you knew she was pregnant, that you knew she was alone, that you knew she needed help, and still walked away." Caroline's knees wobbled again, but she stood her ground. "You knew," she whispered. "All this time, you knew." Adrian closed his eyes for a long moment. When he opened them again, something in his expression broke. "I didn't want to believe it." The room fell silent again. Caroline stared at him, stunned. "What?" Adrian swallowed hard. "I didn't want it to be true. I was 20. My father threatened to cut me off. The board told me a baby would destroy my future. I thought, if I didn't confirm it, if I didn't acknowledge it, then it wouldn't be real." The excuse hit Caroline like a slap. "So you hid," she said softly, "and you let me suffer alone." He reached toward her helplessly. "Caroline, I was scared. And I was dying," she cried, the words ripping from her chest. "I was in the hospital with complications, terrified I might lose my child, terrified I might not make it through the night, and you were running searches on me like I was a problem." Evan's eyes filled, anger and heartbreak colliding inside him. "You didn't want me," he whispered. "You didn't even want to know." Adrian looked gutted. He took a step closer. Evan stepped back. "Please," Adrian rasped, "just let me explain," but the moment was too far gone. His mask had shattered beyond repair. Before he could say another word, a loud hum filled the room as journalists lifted their equipment. Microphones, cameras, flashes. This was not a gala anymore. This was an execution. "Mr. Lockwood," a reporter shouted, "how long did you hide evidence of your son's existence?" Another chimed in. "Did you tamper with medical records?" A third yelled, "Will the board force your resignation tonight?" Adrian froze, trapped in a spotlight he couldn't charm his way out of. Troy stepped beside Caroline and Evan, placing a protective hand on the boy's shoulder. "This ends now," Troy said quietly. "No more secrets." Adrian looked between them, his past, his mistakes, the family he abandoned, and the truth etched itself permanently across his shaken face. He had finally lost control. And the entire ballroom watched, breathless, as the mighty Adrian Lockwood began to fall. The ballroom, moments ago humming with eager scandal, suddenly shifted into a heavier, darker silence. It wasn't the hush of curiosity anymore. It was the charged quiet before a storm consumes everything in its path. And Adrian Lockwood stood at the center of it, exposed, cornered, and more vulnerable than anyone had ever seen him. Caroline didn't move. Evan stood at her side, like a shaken shadow. Troy remained calm, but there was tension building beneath his steady exterior, ready to ignite if Adrian pushed too far. "Everyone, please," Adrian's PR director begged, waving his arms. "Mr. Lockwood will address questions later." "No," a reporter snapped. "He'll address them now." A chorus of agreement rose. People weren't just watching anymore, they were hunting. The scent of a billionaire's downfall was too intoxicating to resist. Adrian tried to regain control, straightening his shoulders. "This is a private matter." "Private?" Caroline's voice sliced through the air before he could finish. "You wanted privacy? You should have thought about that 17 years ago." The words hit him with brutal precision. Gasps echoed again. Some guests murmured in sympathy for Caroline. Others leaned closer like they were devouring every second. Adrian opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. "I made a mistake." Caroline laughed, but there was no humor in it. "A mistake is forgetting a birthday. A mistake is losing your keys. What you did wasn't a mistake. It was abandonment." Evan's hands tightened into fists. "Why didn't you reach out?" he demanded. "Why'd you act like she never existed? Why'd you pretend I didn't?" Adrian's voice cracked. "I thought I'd lost my chance. I didn't know how to come back." Caroline shook her head. "You didn't want to come back. You wanted the easy road, the one without responsibility." Adrian stared at the floor, unable to meet her eyes. The host tried again to salvage the event, tapping the microphone nervously. "Ladies and gentlemen, perhaps we should all take our seats for dinner." No one budged. This wasn't a gala anymore. This was a reckoning. Troy placed a gentle hand on Caroline's back. "You don't owe him anything," he reminded her softly, and for the first time Caroline realized she believed it. She swallowed, her voice steadied. "All these years, I told myself I was strong because I survived what you did to me. But the truth is, I survived despite you." Adrian's eyes lifted. broken, desperate. "I didn't come here to hurt you." "But you did," she whispered. "You hurt me then, and you're hurting Evan now just by standing here." A ripple of sympathy moved through the guests. Even the wealthiest, coldest donors softened at the sight of a mother shielding her son. "You should leave," Troy said quietly to Adrian. Adrian stiffened. "I'm not going to walk away like you did before?" Caroline snapped. Silence. Perfect, devastating silence. Adrian took a shaky breath. "Caroline, Evan, I want to make this right." Evan's voice was hoarse. "It's too late." The boy turned away, not in anger but in a heartbreak so pure it made several guests blink back tears. And for the first time, Adrian looked small, like the powerful man had been stripped away, leaving only the frightened, flawed human beneath. Caroline felt something inside her shift. Not forgiveness, not yet, but clarity. She stepped closer to Evan, wrapping her arm around him. "We're leaving," she said simply. Troy nodded. "I'll take you both out the back." Adrian reached out instinctively. "Caroline." She didn't turn around. "You had 17 years, she said softly. "And tonight was the first time you ever said my name." Her words sank into the air like the closing lines of a tragedy. Then she walked away, her son beside her, Troy guiding them, while the entire ballroom watched the woman Adrian Lockwood once destroyed rise higher than he ever could. And as the doors closed behind her, Adrian stood frozen in a room full of witnesses, realizing the truth he feared the most. Caroline Hale was no longer his weakness. She had become his consequences. The service hallway behind the ballroom was cold, narrow, and humming with the distant clatter of hotel staff, a stark contrast to the glittering chaos Caroline had just escaped. She leaned against the wall, her breathing unsteady. Evan stood beside her, arms wrapped around himself, trying to make sense of a world that had tilted too suddenly. Troy kept a watchful distance, giving them space while staying close enough to intervene if she stumbled again. He had always been good at that, knowing when to step in and when not to. Caroline pressed her hands to her face, her voice muffled. "I didn't want this. I didn't want any of this to happen tonight." Evan swallowed hard. "Mom, did you really almost die when I was born?" Her hands dropped slowly and her eyes softened with painful honesty. "Yes, I had complications. They didn't know if either of us would make it." He blinked fast, trying not to cry. "And he knew? He knew all that and still didn't come?" The question pierced her deeper than she expected. She cupped his cheek gently. "Honey, people like Adrian don't change because we want them to. They change when their world forces them to." Troy stepped closer, his voice low. "Caroline, we need to move. The media will try to get through this exit too. I already told hotel security to clear the back corridor, but it won't stay quiet for long." She nodded, forcing her legs to steady. "Thank you." They started down the hallway. Evan walked close to her, shoulders tense. Troy stayed on her other side, a silent shield. Every step away from that ballroom felt like peeling back another layer of panic. But panic had a way of returning. As they reached the rear service elevators, Caroline's phone buzzed violently in her hand. Notifications flooded the screen. Messages, missed calls, alerts from unknown numbers. Her stomach sank as she read the trending headline. "Lockwood Scandal. Mystery woman identified as former girlfriend. Sources claim she hid child for years." Caroline's breath caught. No. They're blaming me." Evan peered over her shoulder. "That's not fair. You didn't hide anything." Troy cursed under his breath. His PR team moved fast. "They're painting you as the manipulative one." Her heart clenched painfully. "Why would they say that? Why would they go after me?" "Because destroying you is easier than admitting Adrian lied," Troy said. "They'll spin whatever story benefits him, especially tonight." Caroline shook her head. "I can't fight a billionaire's PR team, Troy. You don't have to fight them alone." The elevator pinged open. Before they could step inside, a security guard approached hurriedly. "Miss Hale? I have instructions from the board to escort you off the premises immediately. They said you're not allowed back to complete the event." The blow felt physical, like someone had punched her in the ribs. "I'm fired?" she whispered. The guard wouldn't meet her eyes. "They want you gone before more cameras show up." Heat built behind her eyes. Her job, her one fragile stability, was gone because of a man who once abandoned her and now was destroying her life again. Evan stepped forward, voice shaking with fury. "She didn't do anything. Why are you treating her like Evan, Caroline whispered, touching his shoulder. It's okay. It wasn't, but she couldn't let him carry this weight. Troy's jaw tightened. This is wrong. I'll handle it. How? She asked, defeated. By using influence the board doesn't know I have, he replied quietly. But right now, let's get you out safely. The guard gestured again to the elevator. Please, Miss Hale. Caroline hesitated. Her throat tightened. She had never felt so small, so powerless, so unfairly punished for simply surviving a past she never asked for. She stepped into the elevator. Evan followed. Troy held the doors open for a moment, watching her with an expression she couldn't decode. Part worry, part anger, part something gentler. As the doors slid shut, sealing them away from the glittering world that had just devoured her dignity, Caroline heard the faint echo of voices from the ballroom. Reporters shouting, guests murmuring, Adrian trying to defend the indefensible. And all she could think was, how many more pieces of me does he get to break before it's finally enough? The elevator doors slid open to the dimly lit underground level of the Ritz-Carlton, a place meant for staff deliveries, not emotional collapse. The echo of distant machinery hummed through the concrete walls. Caroline stepped out slowly, each movement heavy, as if her body were made of soaked wool. Evan shadowed her every step, his hands clenched into fists so tight his knuckles turned white. Troy walked ahead to make sure the area was clear, his shoulders rigid with a quiet fury he hadn't shown in the ballroom. His footsteps were controlled, but every line of his posture radiated the same thought. They went too far. Caroline wrapped her arms around herself, shivering despite the stagnant heat of the underground level. Her phone buzzed again. Another alert. Another headline. Another dagger. She stopped walking. I can't look at it, she whispered. I can't read one more thing about myself. Evan took the phone gently from her hands. I'll turn it off. But he didn't. He froze mid-motion, eyes scanning something across the screen. Mom? Her heart sank. What now? Evan swallowed. They found my photos. Online. Caroline's breath hitched. No. Troy turned instantly. Show me. Evan reluctantly handed him the phone. On the screen were images from Evan's small social media account. Photos from his school play, a selfie Caroline had taken with him at a park, a shot of him holding a sketchbook. Someone had stitching them together with a caption. Is this Adrian Lockwood's secret son? Internet thinks yes. Caroline grabbed the phone as tears burned her eyes. He's a minor. He's just a child. They can't do this. They already did, Troy said, voice tight. Another notification surged in. A comment. She trapped him. Gold digger. Another. Why hide the kid? Must be dirty. A third. Bet she wants a payout. Caroline covered her mouth. I can't do this again. I can't let them tear him apart. Troy's voice gentled. Caroline, listen to me. This isn't your fault. Yes, it is, she snapped, then immediately shook her head. No, I didn't mean, Her voice cracked into pieces. It feels like I brought him into a world that keeps punishing him for existing. Evan stepped closer, eyes shining. Mom, please don't say that. Caroline's walls, built through years of survival, finally buckled. I tried so hard, Evan. I tried to protect you from this exact nightmare. And now it's happening in front of the entire world. Her knees wobbled. She braced herself against a pillar. I'm so tired of running. Troy stepped in front of her, lowering his voice. Then stop running. Let me take some of that weight. She blinked at him through tears. Why? Why do you care this much? He hesitated just long enough for her breath to catch. Because someone should have cared about you a long time ago, he said quietly, and someone should care now. Caroline's throat tightened. No one had spoken to her like that in years. Before she could respond, a loud metallic clang sounded from the stairwell nearby. Caroline jolted in panic, but it wasn't paparazzi or reporters. It was two men in suits, board members from the event. They approached with clipped footsteps and cold, corporate faces. Troy, one of them said stiffly, your presence with Miss Hale has raised questions. Were you aware of her connection to Lockwood? Troy's expression darkened. Careful. We're simply ensuring the event's integrity, the other said, and we've decided Miss Hale's employment must be terminated immediately. Caroline felt the words slice through her. Not suspended, not questioned, terminated, all because Adrian wanted to hide his past. Troy stepped in front of her, voice cold as steel. If you fire her, you'll lose more than a lighting designer. You'll lose your biggest investor. The two men stiffened. Investor? What are you talking about? Troy pulled out his phone, tapping open an email. As of 24 hours ago, my firm acquired controlling interest in the foundation hosting this event, which means I can overwrite your decision. The board members blanched. Caroline stared at Troy, stunned. Evan whispered, "Mom, he's saving us." But the relief was too overwhelming. It collided with exhaustion, fear, humiliation, everything she had held back for 16 years. Her breath cracked. "I can't," Caroline gasped. Evan grabbed her hand. Troy caught her elbow. The tears finally broke free, and as Caroline sobbed in the dim underground corridor of the Ritz-Carlton, the world finally saw the cost of a secret she never asked to carry. The car ride to Troy's private parking garage just a block from the Ritz-Carlton was painfully silent. Not a heavy silence. No, it was sharper, trembling, full of words that were too big and too dangerous to speak. The moment they stepped inside the warm, modern lobby of the building, Caroline felt her legs wobble again. The polished marble floors, the soft elevator chime, even the quiet hum of air conditioning, all of it felt unreal, like she was drifting through someone else's life. Troy walked beside her, ready to catch her again if she faltered. Evan stayed close on her other side, his eyes red but dry now, hardened by a kind of anger she had hoped he'd never have to feel. They stopped in the lounge area, soft gray sofas, tall windows showing the Manhattan skyline like glittering teeth. Caroline sank onto the nearest couch. Her hands shook as she rubbed her temples. "I'm sorry," she murmured. "You shouldn't have to help us like this. This isn't your mess." Troy crouched in front of her. "Caroline, look at me." She hesitated but lifted her gaze. "This isn't charity. I'm here because you deserve someone in your corner. Both of you do." Evan sat beside her, elbows on his knees. He stared at the floor, jaw tight. Caroline placed a hand on his shoulder, but he didn't look up. "What's going on in your head?" she asked gently. Evan's voice was low, wounded. I don't understand why he didn't want me." Caroline's heart splintered. "Honey, I wasn't even born yet," Evan continued, voice cracking. "I didn't do anything wrong, Mom, so why would he pretend I didn't exist?" The room fell still. This was the moment she'd feared since the day she first held him, when he would finally ask the question she had no clean answer for. She touched his cheek. "It wasn't you, Evan. It was him, his fear, his pride, his family, his ambition. He chose the easy path, the selfish path. But it was never because you weren't wanted." Evan's throat bobbed. "But it feels like I wasn't." Troy sat on the coffee table facing them. "Listen to me, Evan. Men like Adrian Lockwood don't deserve kids like you. They don't understand loyalty or love. They understand power. And when something threatens that power, they run. You weren't the problem. You were the truth he couldn't face." Evan blinked hard, tears gathering again. "But now," Troy added, "he has to face it and face you." A small knock broke the quiet. It was Troy's assistant, holding an iPad. "Sir, you need to see this," she said. Troy took it, his brows furrowed. He turned the screen toward Caroline and Evan. It displayed a live stream, news outlets replaying footage from the gala, reporters shouting questions, Caroline collapsing, Evan kneeling beside her, Adrian being swarmed. The worst moments of their lives looped for millions to dissect. Then another notification appeared across the bottom. "Breaking. Adrian Lockwood announces urgent press conference tonight." Caroline tensed. "No, he's going to spin it. He's going to blame me." Troy shook his head. "Not with what's on that drive." Evan looked up. "What's on it?" "What did he do?" Caroline hesitated. She didn't want to burden him further. But Evan wasn't a child anymore. Tonight had taken that from him. Troy exhaled and answered. "It proves Adrian accessed your mom's hospital files the night she almost died. He knew about the pregnancy. He knew she was alone. He knew you existed." Evan stared at him. "So he saw everything?" "Everything," Troy said. Something inside Evan cracked, not loudly, but deeply. Anger surged in his eyes, but so did grief, too tangled to separate. Caroline pulled him against her. He resisted for a second, too hurt, too raw, then collapsed into her arms, shoulders shaking. She ran her fingers through his hair like she had when he was little. "It's okay," she whispered. "I've got you. I always have." For a long moment, the world outside didn't exist. No cameras, no headlines, no whispers. Just a mother holding her son together in a world determined to tear them apart. Then Evan lifted his head, eyes fierce with new resolve. "Mom," he said quietly, I want to hear what he says tonight. I want to hear him admit it. Caroline froze, because in Evan's voice she didn't hear a boy anymore. She heard a young man ready to confront the father who abandoned him. And somewhere deep inside her, a new fear bloomed, because this time, Evan wasn't running. He wanted to fight. The press conference announcement spread across New York like wildfire. Every news push notification, every trending tab, every gossip blog carried the same headline: Adrian Lockwood to address alleged secret child scandal tonight. Inside Troy's private lounge, the atmosphere thickened with dread. Caroline sat rigid on the sofa, clutching a throw pillow, as if it could anchor her trembling heart. Evan paced in front of the glass windows overlooking Park Avenue, his sneakers squeaking faintly against the polished floor. Troy stood near the bar counter, phone pressed to his ear. Yes, shut it down. No statements from Caroline. Block every reporter, and get the legal team ready. His voice was low, lethal. When he hung up, he rubbed the bridge of his nose. He moved faster than we expected. Caroline swallowed. He's gonna twist everything. He'll spin it until people think I trapped him or lied. Troy shook his head. He can't spin what's on that drive. But he doesn't know you have it, Caroline whispered. Not yet. Evan stopped pacing. Where is he holding the conference? Troy hesitated. Manhattan Tech Plaza, his headquarters. Evan scoffed bitterly. Of course, his throne. Caroline shot him a warning look, but Troy spoke first. Evan has the right to be angry. The boy sat beside her, shoulders hunched. I don't want to be angry, Mom. I feel like my whole life changed in one night. I don't even know what parts of me belong to him. Her heart clenched. You are nothing like him. Not one piece. Evan shook his head. But I have his face. Troy knelt in front of him, voice firm. You may look like him, kid, but everything that matters, that comes from her. Caroline's eyes stung. Before she could speak, the television mounted on the wall flashed to a live feed. Reporters crowded outside the tech building. Microphones clashed. Lights glared. The world was ready to feast. Then the anchor announced, "We now go live to Adrian Lockwood." The three of them froze. Adrian appeared behind a sleek podium, dressed in a tailored navy suit, his face pale but composed. For a moment, the mask was back. The confident CEO, the man who owned rooms simply by entering them. He cleared his throat. Thank you all for coming on such short notice. Evan leaned forward, jaw set. Adrian continued. Tonight, an unexpected and deeply personal event occurred at the charity gala. An event involving a woman from my past and a teenage boy. Caroline's stomach twisted. Rumors are circulating, Adrian said, and I want to clarify that I have never knowingly fathered a child. Any suggestions otherwise are malicious misinterpretations intended to damage my reputation during a crucial time for my company. Evan's breath hitched. He's lying. Caroline felt the words like cold knives. Adrian wasn't done. In fact, he added, voice steady, we have strong reason to believe this woman, Miss Caroline Hale, may have withheld information from me for financial gain. My legal team is investigating the possibility that tonight's confrontation was orchestrated. Caroline clapped a hand over her mouth. He's accusing me? Troy's expression turned to stone. Evan shot to his feet. Turn it off. Turn it off. But Troy didn't. They needed to hear it all. Adrian continued, I urge the public not to jump to conclusions. I will cooperate fully with any formal investigation, but I cannot allow blatant manipulation to tarnish my name or undermine my company's future. That was the final blow. Caroline crumpled inward, devastated. He's going to destroy me. He has the money, the lawyers, the power. I can't win against him. Evan stood trembling, fists clenched so tightly his nails dug into his palms. He's not just lying, he's trying to erase us. Troy stepped forward then, his voice low but fierce. He can try, but he doesn't get the last word. Caroline wiped her tears. Then who does? Troy glanced at her, then at Evan. You do, he said. Both of you. Outside the window, Manhattan lights glittered like harsh stars, cold, sharp, unforgiving. Inside, the truth that had been buried for 16 years began to rise with a new, unstoppable force. And for the first time, Caroline and Evan weren't running from the storm. They were turning to face it. The next morning, Manhattan felt colder than usual, as if the entire city were holding its breath. The scandal had exploded overnight, and by sunrise, Adrian Lockwood's empire trembled beneath the weight of public outrage. News trucks crowded outside his headquarters, helicopters thumped overhead, and every screen on Times Square flashed the same headline: Lockwood accused of cover-up. Board calls emergency meeting. In Troy's apartment, Caroline sat at the kitchen island, staring at her untouched coffee. She looked hollow, as if the night had drained the last reserves of strength she'd been carrying for 16 years. Evan paced behind her, restless. "Mom, you're not eating." "I'm not hungry," she murmured, eyes distant. Troy emerged from his office wearing a crisp charcoal suit, his expression sharpened by purpose. "The board meeting starts in 30 minutes, he announced. "They've summoned him, and they've summoned me." Caroline stiffened. "You? Why?" Troy's gaze softened. "Because I own more of his company than he knows, and I've been waiting a long time for the truth to matter." She blinked at him. "Troy, you don't have to do this." "Yes," he said gently, "I do." Before she could speak again, Troy's phone buzzed. He read the message, jaw tightening. "It's happening now. They're moving to vote on suspending him." Evan looked hopeful for the first time. "Can they fire him?" "If the board believes he jeopardized the company's future," Troy replied, "they can do a lot more than fire him." A flicker of fear crossed Caroline's face. "But if this gets worse, could he retaliate? Legally?" Troy stepped closer. "Caroline, you survived everything he tried to erase. You and Evan deserve justice. Today is the first step." Caroline lowered her gaze. "I'm just scared. He has power." Troy gently lifted her chin. "So do you. And today, you're not fighting alone." Meanwhile, inside the 26th floor boardroom of Lockwood Medical Tech, the tension was suffocating. 12 executives sat around the massive glass table, their designer watches and Mont Blanc pens glinting under the fluorescent lights. And at the head, separated from them by a gulf of shame, sat Adrian Lockwood. Dark circles bruised his eyes. His suit was wrinkled. His confidence, once his greatest weapon, was nowhere to be seen. The chairwoman, Margaret Doyle, cleared her throat. "Mr. Lockwood, as you are aware, last night's events triggered a catastrophic media frenzy and a 22% drop in pre-market value. Investors are panicking." Adrian swallowed. "The allegations are false." "Are they?" Margaret cut in sharply. "Because we've reviewed preliminary findings, and it appears you accessed confidential medical files 17 years ago." Murmurs surged through the board. "That was a misunderstanding," Adrian insisted. "I didn't know what I was looking at. I panicked." "Mr. Lockwood," another board member said coldly, "panic does not excuse a crime. You violated federal privacy laws, and the public thinks you hit a child." Adrian's face reddened. "I didn't know." Then the doors opened. Troy Bennett entered. Adrian shot to his feet. "What are you doing here?" Troy didn't even spare him a glance. "As majority stakeholder in the Bennett-Lockwood partnership, I've been invited to participate." Adrian's voice trembled. "This is my company." "Not anymore," Troy said quietly. Shock rippled around the room. Margaret gestured to an empty seat. "Mr. Bennett, please join us. We're discussing whether Mr. Lockwood should be placed on immediate leave." Adrian's breath quickened. "You can't do this. I'm the face of this company." "That's precisely the problem," Margaret replied. Troy slid into the seat, folding his hands calmly. "I vote for suspension." Adrian froze. One by one, other board members echoed, "I vote for suspension." Suspension, suspension, effective immediately. The votes formed an avalanche. Adrian's world collapsed in real time. When the final vote was cast, Margaret delivered the verdict. "Adrian Lockwood, you are hereby removed from all operational responsibilities pending a full investigation." Adrian's voice broke. "You can't. You don't understand." Troy finally looked him in the eyes. "Oh, I understand perfectly," he said. "You thought you could bury the past, but the past has teeth." Adrian staggered back into his chair, stunned. And in that moment, humiliated, dethroned, powerless, he finally understood. Caroline wasn't the one losing everything. He was. Caroline had barely slept. Even inside Troy's penthouse, quiet, secure, protected, the world outside felt vicious, like a storm pounding endlessly against the glass walls. Morning sunlight crept across the living room floor, but instead of warmth, it carried headlines. Endless headlines. Her phone buzzed nonstop, vibrating across the marble counter until she finally picked it up with trembling fingers. Sources. Caroline Hale may have manipulated Lockwood for years. Single mother accused of setting up dramatic gala scene. Teen at center of scandal speaks, unconfirmed. Caroline's eyes blurred. "They're going after Evan now," she whispered. Evan, curled in an armchair with a blanket over his shoulders, stiffened. What did they say about me? She hid the screen behind her hand. Nothing you need to see. Troy emerged from the hallway, tie in one hand, jacket in the other. The moment he saw her expression, he knew. Caroline, he said firmly, don't read anything online. She blinked hard. They're calling me a liar, a manipulator. A distraction, Troy finished. Something to blame so Adrian looks less guilty. Evan stood abruptly. We should tell the truth. We have the drive. Why can't we just release everything? Because, Troy said gently, once it's out, you can't take it back. People will twist it, pull it apart, spin it in ways you can't predict. Caroline's voice cracked. They're already doing that. Troy moved closer, resting a hand on her shoulder. That's why we handle this strategically. You're not alone anymore. You have me, you have legal support, and the board is already turning on Adrian. But the public isn't, Caroline whispered. The internet believes whatever headline hits first. Before Troy could answer, the doorbell rang. Caroline flinched. Please don't be reporters, please. Troy motioned for them to stay back. Security cameras fed directly to the screen near the door. He tapped it once. A woman in a tailored navy dress appeared. Calm, professional, early 50s. Evan squinted. Who's that? Troy exhaled with relief. Help. He opened the door. Caroline, the woman said softly. My name is Dana Wells. I'm a crisis attorney. Troy hired me. Caroline blinked. A crisis attorney? Dana nodded. I specialize in protecting victims from media defamation, unlawful targeting, and corporate retaliation. And you, Miss Hale, have just experienced all three in less than 24 hours. Caroline's chest tightened. I don't have the money to hire someone like you. Troy stepped in, voice firm. You don't need to. I'm paying for the entire team. She stared at him, stunned. Troy, why? Because you and Evan deserve protection Adrian never gave you, he said, and because I promised someone important I would look after you. Caroline froze. My mother. It wasn't a question. Troy nodded once. The room went still. Evan looked between them, confused but deeply moved. Dana cleared her throat gently. If you're ready, I'd like to begin by reviewing the online attacks. We will file immediate injunctions against defamatory publications, request takedowns, and notify platforms about violation of a minor's privacy. Caroline's breath caught. You can do that? I can do more. Dana said, I can make sure these people learn what consequences feel like. For the first time since the gala, Caroline felt something that wasn't fear. She felt possibility. But moments later, her phone buzzed again. This time with a notification so large it took up the entire screen. She opened it. A new headline burned across the feed. Exclusive, Lockwood family statement. This woman has been obsessing over Adrian for years. Caroline felt the blood drain from her face. No, she whispered. They're turning his family against me too. Evan slammed his fist onto the table. This is disgusting. Why would they say that about you? Dana gently placed a hand on his shoulder. Because when powerful men fall, their families attack anyone they think caused the collapse. This is strategy, not truth. Troy knelt in front of Caroline. Listen to me. This is the moment they expect you to break. Don't. I feel like I already have, she whispered. Evan slid his hand into hers. Not anymore. We fight back. Caroline looked at their joined hands. Her son on one side, Troy on the other, Dana standing behind them. Something inside her steadied. Not healed, not yet, but steadied. She lifted her chin. Then let's fight, she said softly, because I'm done being the one who gets crushed. And in that instant, something shifted in the air. Caroline Hale, who had spent 16 years surviving in silence, was finally ready to be heard. The afternoon sun dipped low behind the Manhattan skyline, staining the sky a burnt orange that reflected across Troy's penthouse windows. But inside, there was no warmth, no peace. Only tension strung tightly across the room, like a wire ready to snap. Caroline sat on the sofa, reviewing documents Dana had prepared, legal shields, statements of rights, procedures for protecting minors in media crises. She read each word carefully, as if one wrong blink would bring the world crashing down again. Troy stood near the kitchen counter, talking quietly on the phone, his voice low and controlled. The tone of a man calculating, negotiating, preparing for war. Across the room, Evan paced again, back and forth, a storm compressed into one teenage body. Finally, he stopped. Mom. She looked up instantly, she always did. He took a breath, trying to keep his voice steady. I want to speak, publicly. Caroline froze. No, absolutely not. Mom, no. Her voice shook. You're 16. You don't need to be in front of cameras. They'll tear you apart. Evan stepped closer, fists clenched. They already are. They're calling me a mistake, a lie, a scandal. His voice broke, but he pushed on. They're twisting who I am because I'm staying silent. Caroline's throat tightened painfully. You're not responsible for fixing what he broke. Evan swallowed. But maybe I'm the only one who can make him tell the truth. The room went painfully still. Even Troy ended his call and turned, watching carefully. Caroline shook her head vigorously. You shouldn't have to confront him. You don't owe him anything. But I owe myself something, Evan said quietly. I've spent my whole life wondering who he was, what he was like, why he didn't want me, and last night, for the first time ever, he looked at me. Caroline's breath caught. Evan continued, his voice raw. And I saw fear in his eyes, fear of me, and it made me realize something. I'm not the weak one in this story. He is. Troy stepped closer, expression thoughtful. What exactly do you want to say to him? Evan looked at him, then at his mother. I want him to admit what he did. Not in a press conference, not through his lawyers, to my face. Caroline felt her heart lurch. Evan, seeing him again might hurt you even more. He shook his head. I'm hurt anyway. Hiding from him won't change that. Dana folded her arms. Legally speaking, a direct conversation could be risky. Emotionally, too. But, if done privately, it could also corner Adrian before he can rewrite more of the narrative. Troy nodded. Adrian's press conference didn't satisfy the media. They smell blood. He's weakened. A meeting with Evan might force him to confront everything he's trying to dodge. Caroline's pulse hammered. I don't want Evan near him. Evan sat beside her, taking her hand gently. Mom, I'm not doing this because I want a father. I'm doing it because I want answers. I deserve at least that. She looked into his eyes, the same gray eyes Adrian had, yes, but softer, kinder, infinitely braver. Evan wasn't a boy anymore. He was someone refusing to let a man's cowardice define him. Her heart cracked open. Troy sat on her other side. Caroline? He's right. This might be the moment Adrian finally tells the truth. And Evan has earned that truth. She closed her eyes, torn between fear and fierce maternal protectiveness. Then she exhaled shakily. Fine, she whispered. But I'll be right there beside you. Evan nodded, relieved, determined, terrified, all at once. Dana began organizing the meeting. I'll contact his lawyers. We'll set it under strict conditions. No recording, no PR team, no manipulation. Troy placed a steady hand on Caroline's back. You won't face him alone this time. For a brief moment, everything was quiet again. Then his phone buzzed. He checked it, and his expression darkened. It's Adrian, Troy said. He wants to meet, tonight. Evan stood. Good. Caroline swallowed hard, bracing herself. Because the next step wasn't just a confrontation. It was the moment 17 years of silence finally demanded a voice. The air inside the private conference suite at the Park Hyatt felt unnaturally still, as if even the ventilation system was holding its breath. Floor-to-ceiling windows displayed the Manhattan skyline in cold blues and silvers, but the room itself was dim, lit only by the faint glow of modern sconces. A long obsidian table stretched across the center, pristine and intimidating. Caroline's stomach twisted at the sight of it. Tables like this were built for power. For negotiations. For men like Adrian. Tonight it was built for truth. Troy stood beside her, broad and steady, an anchor at her side. Evan stood on her other, his jaw clenched in determination that reminded her painfully of the boy he used to be, and the young man he was becoming far too quickly. Dana reviewed her notes one last time. Ground rules, she said firmly. Adrian enters alone. No lawyers, no PR team, no staff, no recordings. If he tries to manipulate the discussion or gaslight any of you, I end the meeting immediately. Understood? Caroline nodded, though her breath came shallow. Evan nodded too, shoulders squared. Troy's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. He's here. Footsteps echoed down the hallway, slow, dragging, almost uncertain. Then the door opened. Adrian Lockwood stepped inside. He looked nothing like the commanding CEO who strutted across stages and magazine covers. His designer suit hung crooked on his frame. His hair was disheveled. His eyes, once sharp and calculating, were exhausted hollows. He shut the door behind him. For a moment, no one moved. Then his gaze drifted to Evan, the boy he'd never held, never acknowledged, never protected. Evan stiffened but didn't look away. Adrian cleared his throat. I wasn't expecting all of you. Troy's voice was icily polite. We're here because you're not going to twist this into another performance. Adrian swallowed. I came to talk to Caroline. Dana stepped forward. No, you came to face what you've avoided for 17 years. He flinched. Then Evan spoke. His voice was steady, but soft. I asked for this meeting. Adrian's attention snapped to him immediately. You did? Yes. Evan lifted his chin. I want to know why. Why what? Adrian whispered. Why you didn't want me? Caroline's breath hitched, but she kept still. Troy placed a firm hand on the table, grounding her. Adrian stared at Evan, pain rippling across his features. It wasn't about you. Then what was it about? Evan demanded. Because from where I'm standing, it sure looks like you just didn't care. Adrian's voice cracked. I cared too much, and I was terrified. Caroline let out a short, bitter laugh. You were terrified? I was 19, Adrian. Terrified doesn't even begin to describe my life back then. He turned to her, guilt shadowing his face. I know, and I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything. No, she cut in sharply. It doesn't. Adrian hesitated, then looked at the boy again. When I found out you were pregnant, I panicked. My father threatened to cut me off. My mother said a child would ruin everything. They told me you would drag me down. I didn't know how to fight them. So you didn't, Evan said quietly. Adrian closed his eyes. I didn't. Evan's voice didn't rise or break. It simply hollowed. That's all I needed to know. Adrian's eyes snapped open. Evan, but the boy shook his head. No, I don't want excuses. I don't want stories about how scared you were. I wanted you to want me, but you didn't, and now it's too late. Adrian took a shaky step forward, but Troy immediately shifted, blocking him. That's close enough, he warned. Adrian stopped, anguish written across every line of his face. Evan, he whispered, I want a chance to know you. Evan stared at him for a long, frozen moment. Then, you had a chance. You had 17 years of chances. Caroline felt tears burn behind her eyes. This was a wound she couldn't bandage for him. Adrian's voice broke completely. I want to try. Evan's reply was soft, but devastating. I don't. Silence swallowed the room. Adrian stood frozen, as if the floor beneath him had cracked open. The world he built, on lies, ambition, and denial, was slipping away. And for the first time, he realized the truth. He had lost the one person whose forgiveness he needed most. Adrian didn't move. For a long moment, he simply stood there, as if Evan's quiet, final rejection had turned his limbs to stone. He opened his mouth, closed it again, then slowly backed away from the table, almost as if he feared getting too close to the truth he had spent 17 years avoiding. Caroline felt the urge to reach for her son, to shield him, to protect him. But she stopped herself. Evan wasn't collapsing, he wasn't breaking, he was steady, strong, and she had no right to interrupt that strength. Dana adjusted her glasses. Mr. Lockwood, you asked for this meeting. That means you will listen, all of it. Adrian's shoulders sagged. I'm listening. Evan stared at him with a quiet intensity. I used to think about you a lot, not in a good way, not in a bad way either, just like a blank spot in my life. Everyone else had a dad. I had a question mark. Caroline felt her throat tighten. Evan continued. I used to imagine maybe you were a good guy who didn't know, or maybe you were dead. That sounds horrible, but it's true. I thought, if you were gone, then it wasn't anyone's fault. Adrian winced as if stabbed. But then last night, Evan said, voice trembling, I saw the way you looked at me, like I was disaster, like I was a threat. And I realized something. He swallowed. You knew. You always knew. And you still chose not to come. Adrian shook his head violently. I didn't know for sure. Yes, Evan said softly, you did. The room fell still. Adrian pressed a hand to his eyes. I was a coward. I was young, stupid, pressured. Caroline cut in sharply. We were the same age, Adrian. I had no money, no family, no support. You want to talk about pressure? Try giving birth alone because the father of your child disappeared. He flinched again. Evan wasn't finished. You ran away from me like I was something to hide. His voice cracked. Do you know what that does to a kid? Adrian's chest rose and fell shakily. I'm sorry. Evan's eyes hardened. Sorry doesn't undo anything. Silence followed, and heavy regret hung in the air like smoke. Dana stepped forward. Now, Mr. Lockwood, before we end this meeting, there's something else you need to hear. Adrian's brows knit. What? Troy opened a folder he'd placed on the table, sliding it toward Adrian. Documents, Emails, timestamps, security logs, proof of your unauthorized access to Caroline's medical records, and proof you used a subordinate's login to hide it. Adrian stared at the file like it burned. Caroline didn't feel vindicated. She felt hollow. Dana added, "If leaked to the press, this would not only destroy your reputation, it could lead to federal charges." Adrian's breath caught. "Why show me this?" Troy's voice was low, controlled, deadly calm. "Because we're giving you one chance to do the right thing. One, confess publicly. Clear Caroline's name. Admit Evan is your son. Accept the consequences." "And if I don't?" Adrian whispered. Troy leaned back in his chair, eyes cold. "Then we will bury you with the truth you tried to bury us with." Caroline watched Adrian's face drain of color. This was a man who once held the world in his palm. Now the world was slipping through his fingers. "I'll lose everything," he whispered. Dana nodded. "Yes, that's what happens when a person abuses their power." Adrian looked at Evan again. Really looked. The boy he'd never known. The boy who no longer needed him. The boy who had grown strong without him. Tears welled in Adrian's eyes. Silent, unshowy, surprisingly genuine. "I don't know how to fix this," he said brokenly. "You can start," Evan replied, "by telling the truth." Adrian inhaled shakily. "Then I'll do it. I'll make a public statement." Dana narrowed her eyes. "Not a statement, a confession." Adrian nodded weakly. "A confession." Caroline exhaled, a mixture of relief and dread curling inside her. Evan sat back, drained, but something inside him softened. Not forgiveness, not even acceptance, just the sense of a door finally closing. The door his father had left wide open for 17 long years. Adrian turned toward the window, Manhattan shimmering beneath them. "When?" he asked quietly. Troy answered, "Tonight." Caroline reached for Evan's hand, because tonight the world would finally hear the truth. The media courtyard outside Manhattan Tech Plaza was a frenzy of lights, microphones, and restless energy. Night had fallen, but the city pulsed with anticipation. Dozens of cameras pointed at the podium where Adrian Lockwood was scheduled to speak, this time not as a powerful CEO, but as a man whose empire had begun to crack under the weight of long-buried truth. Inside a private room overlooking the chaos, Caroline stood by the window, watching the crowd gather like a living ocean. Evan sat on the edge of a leather sofa, his hands folded between his knees, foot bouncing nervously. Troy stood beside him, calm but alert. Dana reviewed a final brief, ensuring Adrian had no wiggle room to twist his confession. "Are you sure you want to be here when he speaks?" Caroline asked Evan softly. Evan nodded. "I need to hear him say it. For real. No cameras hiding him. No lies." Caroline brushed a hand through his hair, smoothing it the way she used to when he was little. "No matter what he says, you're enough. You've always been enough." He leaned into her side for a moment, just long enough to pull together the last threads of courage. A knock on the door. A staffer poked his head in. "Mr. Lockwood is ready." Troy straightened. "Let's go." They walked down a quiet hall to the designated viewing room connected to the live broadcast feed. Adrian waited outside the door, shoulders bowed, suit pressed but spirit unraveling. He didn't try to speak, didn't try to make eye contact. He simply nodded stiffly and stepped toward the stage. The moment he appeared under the harsh lights, the crowd erupted, shouts, questions, flashes firing like lightning. But Adrian lifted his hands, trembling, signaling for silence. When it fell, it was unnervingly complete. He gripped the sides of the podium. "Tonight, I'm not speaking as the CEO of Lockwood Medical Tech. I'm speaking as a man who made choices that hurt people who didn't deserve it." Caroline felt her stomach knot. Adrian continued, voice unsteady. 17 years ago, I learned that a woman I loved was pregnant. Instead of standing beside her, I ran. I invaded her privacy. I violated her trust. I abandoned responsibilities that should have made me a better man, not a coward." Gasps rippled across the crowd. Reporters scribbled furiously. Adrian swallowed hard. "Caroline Hale never lied, never trapped me, never manipulated me. Every rumor about her is false. Every attack on her character is unjustified." Caroline's knees weakened. Dana gripped her elbow to steady her. Evan stood frozen, breath shallow. "And the boy?" Adrian's voice cracked, barely audible. "Evan is my son." The courtyard erupted, shouted questions, flashes, stunned murmurs. Inside the viewing room, Evan's eyes filled, though he refused to let tears fall. Caroline covered her mouth, trembling. Adrian pressed on. "I knew more than I ever admitted, and I failed them. Both of them. I accept full responsibility. Effective immediately. I am stepping down from my position. I will cooperate fully with all legal investigations into my past actions. I will not fight the consequences. His hands shook visibly now. I am sorry. To Caroline, who survived despite my absence, and to my son, who became everything I never deserved. The cameras zoomed in on his face, broken, raw, human for the first time. The broadcast ended. Silence flooded the viewing room. Evan exhaled shakily. He said it. Caroline turned toward him, brushing a tear off his cheek. Are you okay? He nodded slowly. I think I finally know who he is, and who he isn't. Troy stepped closer, placing a reassuring hand on Evan's back. You faced him, and you won. Caroline looked between her son and the man who had stood by her side through every collapse of the last 2 days. Something warm and steady bloomed in her chest, a future she never thought she could have. A future that looked like peace. Evan slipped his hand into hers. Mom, can we go home now? She smiled softly. Yeah, let's go home. They walked out together into the Manhattan night. Caroline on one side, Evan on the other, Troy close beside them, leaving behind the noise, the scandal, and the past that no longer owned them. And for the first time in 17 years, Caroline Hale felt the weight lifting. Not because Adrian confessed, but because she no longer needed anything from him. So the story has finally come to an end. And if you're still here right now, reading these last words, then something in this journey touched your heart in a quiet, personal way. Maybe it reminded you of your own struggles or of someone you love. And that matters. What Caroline and Evan showed us is simple but powerful. Your past doesn't get to decide your future. The people who hurt you don't get to define you. Healing begins the moment you choose yourself. Like Marcus Aurelius wrote, you have power over your mind, not outside events. And when you finally stop running from the pain, you start walking toward your own peace. This story is a reminder that even betrayal, loss, and fear can become the soil where strength grows. You deserve honesty. You deserve respect. You deserve the kind of love that doesn't disappear when life becomes difficult. If this message found you at the right moment, if it made you feel seen, understood, or a little less alone, then please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us bring more stories that heal, comfort, and remind you that you're never walking through life by yourself. And remember, you are stronger than the things that tried to break you.